What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Crazy hair day, but I guess whatever. You know what is scarier than a dictator with a nuke? A dictator with a microphone and a crowd of wealthy yes-men clapping like trained seals while he announces that somebody else's country belongs to him. That is exactly what happened when Vladimir Putin, the self-appointed emperor of Eastern Europe, got on stage at Russia's economic forum in St. Petersburg and declared that all of Ukraine is ours. Not part of it, not Crimea, not Donbas region, not eastern part of Ukraine, all of it. And what did the crowd do? Laugh and applaud. As if he had just told some kind of a killer joke instead of threatening 40 million people with annihilation. This moment was not just another unhinged rant. It was a confession moment for a regime that has done pretending. It's finished. The idea that Russia is a post-imperial state, that it respects borders, sovereignty, human life, well, that's it. It's over. Toss it. Now we have the confirmation that Putin's playbook is the same as it was in 1940s or even 1790s. And while the West is stumbling over itself trying to play diplomat with a man who thinks that tanks are GPS tools, Ukraine is being erased, village by village, missile by missile. So today, let's talk about Putin's fantasy of empire that is morphing into institutional genocide, how the world reacts with diplomatic shrugs, and what Zelensky, Trump, and the international community are scrambling to do in response. There is something profoundly grotesque about watching a war criminal give some kind of a TED talk. That's essentially what Putin did less than a week ago when he took the stage at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Russia's Glitzly Annual, which is basically Russia's Glitzly annual event, where oligarchs, propagandists and the military elite rub each other's shoulders and pretend the ruble is not printed on some kind of a wet napkins, which gonna tear apart the moment you touch it. There, in front of a loyalist audience, Putin declared that the entire Ukraine was ours, whatever it means, and that invoked an old rule that wherever a Russian soldier sets foot is now a Russian territory. That rule, in case you're wondering, was probably carved out in a bayonet in 1812, but whatever. The reaction? Laughter, applause, nods of approval. This was not just crowd-pleasing rhetoric, it was public confirmation of a genocidal policy. Because if you believe Ukraine does not exist, then you're not just erasing lines on the map, you're erasing the people who live there. Putin's statement was not just a simple gimmick. Putin never says anything for no reason. KGB trained him well to think first before opening his mouth. Instead, it was a policy, at least in Putin's mind, and it was cheered not just by the Kremlin elite, but by a portion of unfortunately Russian public as well, who have been so thoroughly marinated in imperial propaganda, they now believe they are liberating people by turning their cities into craters. Of course, Kyiv was not going to let that slide. Zelensky called it for what it is, imperial ambition with a body count. Ukrainian officials condemned the statement as a blatant confirmation of Putin's genocidal goals, not just for Ukraine, but for Belarus, the Baltics, Moldova, and anywhere else Moscow's boots might stomp next. And by the way, speaking about Belarus and that Putin's once again favorite rule, if Russian soldiers already stepped in Belarus, does not it make this country to become Russia as well? What's the difference here with Ukraine then? Looks like once again Putin is very selective to which countries his own imagined rules apply. But anyways, in short, Putin is not just invading Ukraine, he's auditioning for the role of God Emperor of Eurasia, and the judges he's dancing in front of to see if he can reach the grand final? Putin himself. Why would he even claim that the whole of Ukraine is his? Well, mostly because both these countries were a part of the Soviet Union for 69 years. Surprisingly, he conveniently forgot that Kyiv, Rus, was founded almost 1200 years ago, but that's minor detail in Putin's playbook, whatever. He also claims that both nations are Slavic people, same race, same ethnicity. Biologically, maybe yes, but is that so? Let's try to answer this question in our next chapter. Let's now talk about one of Putin's favorite lies, the idea that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. It is literally his favorite bedtime story, One he has been reciting for over 2 decades at this point. He told it to George Bush in 2008, he told it to the Russian public in his 5,000-word essay/manifesto before launching the full-scale invasion in 2022, he told it to many people. He tells it whenever somebody asks why he's bombing maternity hospitals in Mariupol. His response, "We are one people." Right before turning Ukrainian cities into smoking ruins. What's the connection? Nobody knows except him, I guess. The lie works because it allows Putin to deny Ukraine's very existence. Not just its government or borders, but also its history, its culture, its language. According to him, Ukraine is not a real country, just a Soviet relic mistakenly left behind when the USSR collapsed. Never mind that Ukraine's identity predates the Russian state by centuries. Never mind the revolutions, the literature, the art, the constant struggle for sovereignty. In Putin's world, none of that matters. Ukraine is just Russia with bad manners. And this delusion does not live in isolation. It infects the entire Russian state apparatus. From Medvedev muttering about Ukraine being a mortal threat to Patrushev talking about Ukraine ceasing to exist, the language has already shifted from domination to eradication. This is the kind of rhetoric that the United Nations defines as incitement to genocide. And surprise, what Russia is doing on the ground fits perfectly well the definition. Thousands imprisoned, cultural institutions wiped out, Ukrainian identity systematically scrapped from occupied territories and more, forced russification in schools, government, media. This is not just war, it's national erasure by design. Similar events in the past always led to the creation of war tribunals and criminals got punished. Do you think the same, guys, will happen as a result of Russian-Ukrainian war? As a matter of fact, Ukraine already officially formed a war tribunal. We will talk about it in more details in one of our next chapters. So, what about peace? What about diplomacy? What about Trump, Zelensky, and the NATO actions in The Hague? Well, if you're expecting any of these to end in a treaty, unfortunately, well, that is no longer the case, at least not for the near future. Zelensky met with Donald Trump recently to discuss the battlefield situation, the need for more air defense systems, and yes, the ever-elusive dream of a ceasefire. And Trump, in classic fashion, described the meeting as quote-unquote very nice, and said he is going to talk to Putin also quote-unquote. As if this is some kind of customer service issue he can solve by asking to speak to the manager. Okay. Never mind that Putin's entire doctrine is built around not ending this war. Russia rejected already the US-backed ceasefire initiative outright and doubled down on its own demands, such as once again partition of Ukraine, strip of its arms, cancel its future, and maybe rename it to Novorossiya when we're at it. So, why not? That's not negotiation, that's literally a ransom note. Interestingly, by the way, in a rare moment of agreement, both Zelensky and Trump seem to share a common core belief that Putin is not winning this war. Zelensky laid out battlefield data and the human toll Russia's invasion has already taken, pointing out that despite Russia's aggression, they have failed to secure a decisive victory. Trump, for his part, expressed frustration with Putin's unwillingness to compromise and echoed the sentiment that Moscow's campaign is spiraling out of control. Whether for strategic reasons or political optics, both leaders walked away from the meeting aligned on one single truth. This war is far from over, but Putin is definitely not on the path to victory. Trump, by the way, who used to brag about his bromance with Putin, is now publicly frustrated. He admitted the war is out of control, noted the staggering casualties on both sides, and hinted that Putin is being non-cooperative. Donald, you think? The man just literally said he owns entire Ukraine on live TV. He's not trying to make peace, he's trying to finish a conquest. Entire cities are now ghost towns, bombed into silence. Shahid drone strikes are breaking monthly records, and still there are Western leaders sipping espresso at summits talking about de-escalation like this is some kind of a bar fight instead of the largest land war in Europe since the Second World War. Finally, some resemblance of accountability. This week, the Council of Europe and Ukraine signed an agreement to form a special tribunal to prosecute Russian leaders for the crimes of aggression. Sounds noble, right? A courtroom for war criminals. A place where Putin, Mishustin, Lavrov, Medvedev, Shoigu, Kadyrov and their gang of kleptocratic vampires can finally answer for what they have done. But here's the catch. They are immune, at least for now. As long as they hold office, international law cannot touch them. The Tribunal will wait in the shadows like a grim reaper with a clipboard, biding its time until Putin leaves office or gets removed. Or something else. The problem is, that might never happen, unfortunately. The Kremlin has already rewritten Russia's constitution so many times. It now resembles a high school Word document with 3,000 tracked changes. Putin can theoretically stay in power until 2036. That is 11 more years of missile strikes, kidnappings, torture, and history rewritten even further. But why even stop at 2036? Why not go longer? Can he even do that? Of course he can. And what about Moscow's response to this war tribunal creation? Well, very predictable. Zakharova said that this tribunal is meaningless, and that any country that supports it is now hostile towards Russia. Because in Putin's mind, apparently, accountability is the real crime. Not the war crimes, not the mass graves, not the targeting of civilian infrastructure. No, it is the idea that anyone, anywhere, could dare to put Russian leaders on trial. But here's one thing. The existence of this tribunal is more than symbolic. It's a signal, a warning to every aspiring autocrat that the age of impunity may, just may, be coming to an end. And it reminds us that Ukraine is not just fighting for its borders. It is fighting to keep international law relevant, to prove that justice still has a pulse, and that no matter how long it takes, war criminals will face consequences for their actions. History repeats itself. The world never forgets. What I heard, guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work and also see some additional chapter in the end, it will be uploaded on my Patreon. The link is down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
To sway, we do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.